With all of these opening dates and snowmaking going on across the Midwest, I wanted to spend some time discussing why some ski areas tend to push their opening dates versus others that tend to open as quickly as possible. So let's head on over to the desk and break it all down for you guys. Well, this is by far my favorite time of the year. Ski resorts are making snow, the stoke is building, and obviously we have tons and tons of opening days. And I know a lot of people have been concerned that maybe their ski hill is making snow or has lots of snow, but they have yet to open. So I wanted to kind of break down what it takes to get open, some of the strategies that are involved in opening, and why so many ski hills are going to differ in the way that they approach this element of the business. But the first thing I really want everybody to understand here is that every ski resort, regardless of where they're located or who is operating them, wants to get open as soon as they possibly can, or when it makes the most sense for them. They're not doing it to spite you or to make you angry. A lot of times there's things behind the scenes that you might not see or just doesn't make sense for their particular situation. And that's what I really want to lead off with is that, I know a decent amount about this industry, have been around it for a little while now and seen a lot, but I still don't know the individual ski resorts as well as those business owners do. And they're always looking at what's going to be the best situation for them and more importantly for you guys, the guests or the skiers on the hill. And we're going to talk through different strategies of what that means and what that comes to. But just because somebody is open a little bit earlier than another doesn't necessarily mean they have better snowmakers or they have better systems or anything like that. Sometimes it just comes from a strategic standpoint, or as you'll see in just a minute, they think it's just going to be a better situation for their customers. What we're going to do is we're going to break this down into three major categories of opening. And the first one is try to get open as quickly as possible. The second one is get open as quickly as possible with a minimum number of runs or terrain. And the third is a longer plan that plans on stockpiling snow and opening with much more terrain and chairlifts and things like that. So let's start with the first one, and that is getting open as quickly as possible. And this is one that skiers typically really love. But one of the ski areas that I think absolutely falls into this category is Wild Mountain. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Wild Mountain is willing to do whatever it takes to open as quickly as possible. And that means even opening with as little as a couple of feet of coverage on a rope tow and putting some park features out there. Now, there's going to be some naysayers out there that say that, that's not real skiing and, this, that, and the third. And there's going to be other people that are super stoked about just being out on snow. I could see both arguments there, but I think ultimately it still counts. It's still important to the industry because it's a sector, but that's their attitude going into the season. They have this attitude because they've established this reputation for doing it year over year. And the reason they do it is not strictly financially speaking. If you were to take the number of day tickets that they sold for those opening days and basically divided it by, how much it costs for operational standpoint, it really wouldn't make sense. The numbers wouldn't add up. You're not profiting anything from that opening. But what you are doing is getting a lot of publicity, both on the localized scale, but sometimes even the national scale. And we saw that this year with Wild Mountain being the first to open in North America. So those are some of the pros of that. Obviously, you're getting that morale boost for your season pass holders. Pass holders enjoy it. The community enjoys it. There's so many people that just love the hype and the excitement that goes in to opening days, whether it be, on a foot of snow, just, hitting some rails, or top to bottom coverage with the chairlift. People are just stoked to be out there, and that's a huge element and part of our industry that definitely cannot be overlooked. Now, some of the negatives of doing this approach. The first is that you are scrambling your team, your staff members that you obviously want to treat well because you need to keep them employed for the entire season, and it's stressful to open that quickly. A lot of the times, Wild Mountain or any hill that wants to open on that quickly has to have staff members on standby, ready to go at any moment to basically flip their schedule, to come in, work overnight, sometimes even longer hours than they're used to get that hill basically ready so we can be on snow. First of all, for some ski resorts, that's not even possible. If you looked at a bigger ski hill like a Lutsen, a Granite Peak, being able to mobilize that crew, that essential staff that quickly is just not feasible. There's just too many people involved in the operations side for those type of ski resorts, that it would be almost impossible to get them to go from starting to make snow, day one, and by day three we're open. It's just not feasible. It doesn't make any sense. The other element at play here is that it definitely starts to draw your attention away from preparing for the season to just diving right into it. A lot of ski areas like to have announced opening dates, or at least like have a week where we can prep for that. We can staff for that. We're going to open as early as possible. We're going to announce it a week in advance so we can get the staff ready. We can do the training. We can have everything prepared. So when you come, you're going to have the best experience possible. Now, it's always going to be stressful. Opening days are always stressful, regardless of how much time you have to prepare. That's just how it goes. But having a little more time to kind of rally the troops to get everything organized definitely does help. So those are all factors there. And the last thing that I want to bring up as kind of a con, and definitely something to think about, is when you open, you move your resources from building snow and preparing for the season to automatically serving the guests. And I'll kind of give you an example. So in a place like Wild Mountain, if you have snowmakers, basically once they open, it's really hard to then make snow during the day in certain areas of the hill. So then you have to shift your focus to making snow on other areas that, might not be ready to be opened yet, or, maybe that initial area that you opened with still needs snow, but now you have a problem because you have guests on it during the day, so it's really hard to make snow. You can't have lines and pipes going across, electrical going across. So now you have a situation where you can only make snow at night. So you're limiting your hours and your snowmaking ability. So if the conditions are right, what you will see oftentimes is ski areas, instead of opening with limited terrain, they would rather just set everything up and forget about it, because guess what? It's a lot easier to continue to run guns than to break them down, to reset, to move them, to get them up and running again. And you'll see that very frequently with places like for example, this week Buck Hill is pushing it to Tuesday. If they really wanted to, I'm sure that they could open on Sunday, but they're seeing the forecast knowing that, hey, we have the opportunity to make more snow. We don't have to break everything down just so we can run a lift for a day or two and then have to put everything back up. And it just makes more logistical sense to just make more snow, stockpile it, push it out, and then that way we start with a better overall footprint. We're stressing the team out a little bit less, and there's just a lot less moving parts and things that can go wrong throughout that process. Now, I will say there's something to be said about that attitude of just getting open as soon as possible. I got to give huge credit to those ski resorts, because a lot of times, like I said, you're not making money and you're really doing it for the enjoyment of your guests. You're not doing it for your staff members, that's for dang certain. You're doing it because you want your guests to trust that you're invested in giving them the best time possible. It doesn't always have to come across that way, and we're going to move into our second kind of category, which is opening, but with a minimum number of terrain or chairlifts. And I think there's a few resorts that would fall under this category, but I think the most notably and the most obvious is Trollhagen. And I've mentioned this several times on my videos and my live streams, is that Trollhagen has a slightly different attitude. It's very similar to Wild Mountain in the sense that they want to get open as soon as possible, and they're going to do everything they can, and they do, but they have the mindset of, we want to at least give something for everybody on the hill, and they want to take that extra day to make snow, extra 2 days to make snow, so they have top to bottom coverage, they have a chairlift, they have a rope tow, and that way you have, for your free skiers that just enjoy skiing around the hill, you have good coverage on that hill so you can go and make some great turns. You have your park rats, they're still going to get that ability, but we're still opening as quickly as possible. And I think a lot of ski hills kind of fall in this sort of category of, we have a minimum number, and it's all going to depend on your ski hill, your layout of your hill, which we're going to talk a little bit just in a second here. There's a minimum that we need to hit this guest satisfaction, right? Because if we're charging $25 a ticket, we want there to be a minimum level that we want to hit so the guest doesn't feel like they're getting gypped. And there's two sides to that, right? Some people might just be excited to be on snow. Others feel like $25 to ride just one rope tow and I don't even do terrain park. That's not worth it. So there's that attitude and there's that going on as well. So Troll's going to try to get open as early as possible, but their footprint is so much bigger to get open just because of that element. So if you looked at Wild Mountain, I have it up on screen here, they open with just this rope tow and front stage and usually dandy right in here. And you can see that's probably about half of their actual vertical. It's actually probably a little bit less than that. And it doesn't take very long for that area to get open. But if you go into Trollhagen, they usually open with Chair 3, Nessie, and Tomty. So you can see here we have, the two chairs, or the two lifts. We have a rope tow and a Chair 3. And you can see, obviously, that's top to bottom. That is quite a bit more coverage that you're going to need to open that terrain. So right off the bat, when people ask, why isn't my hill open and why aren't they, they have snow, that's could be one of the reasons why. Maybe they don't have enough to cover it. Maybe they don't have enough to hit those bare minimums that they want to hit to be open. And then you go into those other elements that I just talked about. Do you want to, wait so you can just run those guns. You don't have to stress your staff out with just mobilizing them and trying to move them around to make it work for the first couple of days. Another area that I think really falls into this category is Granite Peak, and that's even a step above, say, Trollhagen. And Granite Peak opens usually with Comet Express and usually one of their carpets, probably Blizzard is usually the norm. And you could see right off the bat how much more terrain, I mean, they have to cover. Obviously, they have more vertical just alone, but having to cover those wider runs, having to cover that entire six-pack, the whole loading area, that's just a lot more snow. Now, their system obviously is kind of scaled up to that, but you could imagine it takes a lot more effort to do that. And the other thing you got to think about with Granite Peak and some of these bigger resorts is it takes a lot more manpower too, just from the ticketing side of things. Who's going to manage all the phones, who's doing social media, running the lifts, ski patrol. These are all things that they have to think about. And if you only have, a smaller hill that has a very limited, amount of terrain, it's a lot easier to find those people, to schedule those people. But, Granite Peak has been very vocal about they have a bare minimum that they want to open with as well. Could they blow a bunch of snow and open this carpet within probably a handful of days? Probably. But they want to have an experience that's going to be great for the guests. They know that people travel to Granite Peak, that they want to come up there to ski, and they want to ski a full run. They want to experience that high-speed six-pack that they've invested so much money in. So that's what they're going for, their bare minimum. And the last category that I want to talk about briefly is the delayed opening category. And this one is, we don't see it as often, but it definitely does happen. And I think it's more conditionally based, kind of like we just talked about, where ski resorts will hold off. They'll wait a week or so, even though they could open, maybe even with adequate terrain, but they want to wait because the conditions are just that good. And I think we're seeing some of that right now, right in this case. I talked about Buck Hill earlier, and I think Granite Peak's a little bit of that case right now because they just want to wait and get more terrain open. Could they open this weekend? Probably. I'm sure they could. But, they want to wait a little bit longer to open with more terrain and to just set them up for success moving forward. And the big thing here is snowmaking to understand. And if you guys haven't watched our snowmaking 101 videos, kind of like on some of our other breakdown videos, go watch that stuff because it'll help you know the ins and outs of snowmaking. But snowmaking is tricky because it's really hard to do when there's skiers on the hill because there's usually pipes, electrical hosing that has to go through, and people just don't like skiing while they're making snow. It's not great. It's a lot easier to continue to run that system constantly than to shut it down and have to restart. So when the conditions are right, and you have a front kind of like the one that we're experiencing right now, where we can run those guns for 5 days straight or more, or even 3, a lot of times it makes more sense to step back and say, you know what, we're going to delay our opening because we know in that period that we would be open and not able to really make a lot of snow, we're going to be able to make so much snow in that short period that it's well worth the experience. Because when you come as a guest or a skier, when you come, in a few days, we're going to have more terrain open. The snow is going to be way better. And guess what? We might be done snowmaking in that area. So then we can move to a new area that you're not currently skiing on. And we can kind of just move our snowmaking crew across the hill and adequately make snow on each run as they open. And that's usually how it goes. If a hill opened prematurely and they still weren't done snowmaking on those particular runs, they're going to have to come back to that. And the only time they can usually do that is at night if there's skiers on the hill. So you're limiting your hourly snowmaking capacity by doing that. So I think like with a front like we see right now, sometimes it makes a lot more sense to say, hey, we're gonna hit the pause button here. We're gonna make as much snow as possible, and we're gonna open a little more strongly because that's gonna give not only you a better experience, but it's gonna give our team a better experience too. In our operations side of things, it's gonna run more smoothly. And the last thing I really want to wrap up with is that these are things and attitudes and opening strategies that are usually embedded in the skiing business or the skiing culture at that ski hill. Like I said, every ski hill has a situation, an opening date, an opening kind of strategy that's going to work best for them. And you could see that through the data. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you look at their historical data, and I have some of this up on screen here, you could start to figure out what their kind of strategies are based off of their opening dates, right? And they're going to vary based off of weather, but generally speaking, if you compare them to other ski hills, you can kind of start to paint a picture of what kind of strategy that they imply at their local ski hill. And I want to really just leave with the fact that nobody is out to get you, right? Like, I know people think that ski resorts are, stockpiling snow because they want to save dollars and cents. That's not the case. They're trying to make it the most feasible for their business side, from the side of like, how are we going to sustain this sprint? Because the ski season is a sprint the entire time. It never slows up. So how are we going to prepare our team? How are we going to prepare our slopes for this nonstop sprint that we're about to basically start any day now? How do we prepare ourselves so we're best situated to be successful through this sprint rather than just flipping the switch and getting started? I applaud the Wild Mountains of the world, even the Trollhagens to that degree, the Tyrrell Basins. It's really hard to do, and it takes a big toll on your staff members. But sometimes I think people underestimate how much work that actually takes. And a lot of times it makes just more sense to wait and to push it out. If you guys enjoyed this type of content, make sure you drop a like on there. I know this isn't what we typically do, but you guys seem to enjoy this kind of insider knowledge stuff, so I'll continue to do it if you guys enjoy it. But until next time, enjoy those opening days, pray for snow, and I'll see you guys out there.